right, up next we have the infamous Lee Whitfield, who, yeah, I have to say that, who is a one-wheel expert, a forensicator, and a good friend. Isn't that nice, Lee?
It was very nice.
Are you afraid of what I'll say
I know
later?
some of it was true, but yeah.
No, seriously, Lee has always been one of the best speakers, in my opinion, at the DFIR Summit, so I hope you enjoy his talk. No pressure, Lee.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, yeah, no pressure. I've always been one of the best speakers. Well, we'll see. All right. So, this talk is going to be a little bit different to most of the other talks you're going to hear at the summit over the next couple of days. So, just a little bit about me. I work for SANS full time, working on lab testing and development. I also teach for SANS, teach the Forensics 500 class, and I also run my own consultancy company in all the free time that I obviously have, called 337 Forensics. Then, in addition to that, I also used to run a podcast / webcast called Forensic Forecast, and as a part of that, Forensic Forecast spawned the Forensic Forecast Awards, which we're going to have tomorrow at 4:15. So I'm going to plug this as much as I can. This is because we're doing everything live online this year, I don't have to have the awards already engraved and everything. So we can, in fact, run the voting all the way up until the time that the winners are announced. And so because of that, I'm just going to stick a link into my little hallway here. Feel free to go on, look at the different nominees there and make votes. Like Heather's been reminding everyone anyway. So let's talk about what I want to talk about today then. Now, there's, like I said, I've got a bit of a reputation at SANS. Sometimes I will come out and I'll do highly technical types of talks. Sometimes I'll come out and I'll talk about different cases that I've worked on. And then occasionally I'll take a topic or come up with a topic that isn't either, that is probably a little bit more of a delicate type of topic. The last one that I did was about how forensic investigators deal with the effects of looking at child pornography every day. This one, not going to be quite as extreme as that. This is all safe for work content right here. But what I do want to preface this with is by saying that I came up with this talk months ago, okay? Now, some people might think, well, you're just pandering because of all the events of the last few months and everything else. I'm not, I promise. This was all put together ages ago. And when I saw that Matt was speaking this morning and what his topic was, I got a little bit nervous thinking that he was going to steal some of my thunder. So thankfully, though, his talk was wonderful, and it goes right along with what I'm going to talk about today. There is some crossover with what Matt said, and there is also some further crossover with what we have seen developing in the news the last couple of months with the protests and racial equality movements and things like that. But like I said, not based on that. This was all thought of completely separately. So first thing I want to talk about, just to put some background to this, if you can cast your mind back to January of this year. Now, that seems like it's only a few months ago, but really it was like 7 or 8 years ago in real time, based on everyone's experiences since then. But back in January, back when the world was in a normal state, my wife and I decided we were going to have a date, and we would go out to see a movie. And I didn't know much about the movie that we were going to go and see, except that it had Michael B. Jordan in it. And I really like Michael B. Jordan. I think all the movies that he's done have been pretty good, with the exception of that Fantastic Four atrocity. But you know, all those others have been pretty good. So this movie was called Just Mercy. Now, I'm an avid moviegoer, And so I don't really need much of an excuse to go and see a movie. But seldom do I come away from a movie with such a desire to do something. So this movie did just that. And if you haven't seen it, please, it's available online now. Go watch it. They even had it for free for the whole month of June. The movie is based on a true story. And the premise of this is that this African-American man back in the 90s was arrested, charged, and prosecuted for the death of a Caucasian woman in a small town. There was actually very little evidence that he had anything to do with this, and really no evidence. But due to his skin color and his social class, he was afforded very little in terms of support, leniency, or even justice. His trial is over very quickly. He's found guilty and sentenced to death by electric chair. Now, an attorney named Brian Stevenson, played by Jordan, tries to get the decision reversed, pointing out this severe lack of evidence, all the racist actions taken by the police officers involved, and dishonesty and so forth. Because the attorney himself is African-American, he also ends up being on the receiving end of some threats, harassment, and his investigation seems to hit roadblocks at every single turn. Even after a key witness recants his testimony, really the key witness, the court still refuses to reverse their decision, which was mind-blowing to me. Eventually, they rally the media and they get a retrial, and the man is exonerated, which is wonderful. Now, as the lights came on in the movie theater, I just kind of sat there thinking, and I turned to my wife, Alicia, and I was like, I want to do something. This is important, right? This guy had done nothing wrong, but he still ended up in prison on death row, no less, for years. His previous attorneys had not been very good, had been state appointed, and I believe one of them got disbarred sometime later on, and they just didn't really care. It was another guy going through the system, right? He was too poor to afford his own attorneys. If Brian Stevenson hadn't come in with his charitable work, this guy would have been put to death. There's no question. So here's the thing, though. As we sat there after watching this movie, I turned to my wife and we're talking, and we talked about the feelings that we were having at that point. And I said, I have to do something. I can't believe that there's this kind of stuff can happen. So I felt quite passionate about it. But the thing is that it's all right to have those kinds of feelings. The problem is, though, is that as we walk away from seeing a movie or reading a book or whatever else, life just gets in the way. We get busy with work, we get busy with family, we have other things that we want to do, and eventually those feelings of wanting to do something all kind of get pushed to the side, and slowly they're forgotten. But I was pretty determined. I know that I felt this way before about things and just let things wane and just disappear. I did not want that to be the case this time. So I decided to go and do something about it. So I've got to ask the question of you for you to think for yourself, okay? Now, understanding that none of the cases in Brian's book or the movie were anything to do with digital forensics, okay? What happens when we see some kind of struggle or injustice that does intersect with our own chosen field? Whose responsibility is it to stand up and help? Do we just turn a blind eye and wait for someone else to do it? Well, couple of things that I want to just talk about in terms of what has happened in our field, okay? The first one's quite a well-known case, at least it is for those who've been in the field for a while. Now, for those younger practitioners, you might not recognize the name of Julie Amero, but before you millennials start saying, okay, boomer, let me assure you there is a lot to learn from this case, okay? This all starts back in 2004, where Julie Amero, substitute teacher, living in, I lost the state for a second. Anyway, so, on the East Coast in the States, she was a substitute teacher, comes into a classroom one day. There was a computer at Connecticut. Sorry, got it. There was a computer at the front of the room running Windows 98. There was a projector, obviously projecting onto the wall behind her, so all the students in the class can see. And she's doing something on the computer when she's suddenly hit with a pop-up porn storm, okay? And she panics. She's like clicking on X's all over the place. As she does so, more things pop up on the screen, and it's just a disaster for her. She's panicked. She runs out of the classroom to find another teacher, brings the other teacher in. They're both trying to fix this without any luck, and eventually just pull the power from the back of the computer. All the kids are all laughing about it, obviously, you know, being typical teenagers. But problem solved, everything's fine. Later on, police officers show up to Julie's home and arrest her, and on charges of child endangerment. And she's locked up, and she's put on trial. Now, a forensic investigator for the prosecution, and really I should say forensic investigator for the prosecution, looks at the computer and sees some stuff going on and makes this horrible, horrible conclusion. He is looking at the raw HTML for the page which caused the pop-up storm, and he sees that the link is encoded as red. Now, back in the earlier days of the internet and HTTP, blue was a link you had not clicked on, red was a link you had clicked on, but that was all within the browser. That wasn't hard-coded into the web page. But he said that because that link was red, she clicked on it, she was responsible for creating that pop-up storm which endangered the children. As a result, Julie was convicted, and this was 3 years later in 2007. She was convicted, and she faced potential maximum prison time of 40 years. Now, that seems astronomical in and of itself, but this is the problem, right? Is that she did not have a lot of money. Her and her husband both, you know, she was a substitute teacher, husband, I can't remember what it was that he did for work, but they weren't wealthy by any means. So they couldn't afford their own attorneys and whatever else. I think someone took it on pro bono. They didn't or couldn't afford forensic investigators to look at the computer themselves. And there was just a lot of problems with that, you know, and so the jury relied wholly on the testimony of this one forensic investigator. Well, a few months later, a judge overturned that conviction. He said, look, there's something not right about this. We need to revisit this and figure out a better way. So the attorneys went away and they talked about it. And then the next year, 2008 now, over 4 years since the original incident took place, 4 years of hell for Julie and her husband, she decided enough was enough and she pled guilty to a disorderly conduct charge. Now, because of that, she had her teaching credentials revoked. She's not allowed to teach anymore. And in discussions that I've had with other people, I've learned that, Julie still suffers from medical issues relating to stress from these 4 years, and all kinds of long-term effects, which will be there for the rest of her life. So this is one of these cases that's just so important in terms of, like, what do you do? Do you stand on the sidelines or do you get involved? Now, what I can say is that there were a team of forensics experts that got involved in this and did actually help to submit a report to the courtroom. So that did help a lot in that particular regard. Oops, jumped too far. Okay. The next one I want to talk to you about. This is a really interesting one. This is one I had personal knowledge of too. Now this, when I worked in the UK, I did a lot of criminal prosecution work. A lot of places in the UK contract to different police forces around the country. And we had this one case come in which there was some kind of eBay/PayPal fraud going on. And what had happened is that the police had PayPal had submitted some report, and the police were following up on that fraud, on those fraudulent, on the fraudulent evidence, I guess. And so what happened was that this man and his family were just sitting around at home one evening whenever there was a really loud knock on the door, like a pounding. So they get up and answer the door, and in swarms this huge group of police officers. And they immediately ask questions about where are the computers and the phones in the house. We need to take them. And so they put the father in handcuffs. They walk him outside and put him in the back of a police car. All these other police officers walking in and out of the home, carrying like computers and whatever else. And, all the neighbors are seeing all of this happen. And, obviously the first thought going through their heads was, oh no, that poor man. No, it was probably something very, very different, right? If you saw something like that happening to one of your neighbors, where's your mind going to go? So the rumor mill was in full motion, suggesting that he'd been peddling images of children and so on. His family were ostracized and bullied and all kinds of stuff as a result of this. And the man was told by his employer, don't come back. You're done here. Okay. Now, the real story, however, is a little bit different. The account used to do this defrauding was something along the lines of John Smith at hotmail.com. And so whenever somebody had submitted that report, unfortunately, they fat-fingered something and they did John S. Smith at hotmail.com. And this gentleman owned the second email address that had nothing to do with this. So the police acted on poor information. The guy was arrested, and I think that this was about 5 months after the arrest is when the computers came to us to do the investigation. Whenever we found out they got the email address wrong, we tried to reach out to the police officer in charge, and they're like, oh no, he's on vacation. He can deal with it when we get back. Well, isn't anyone else who's authorized to look at this? They're like, no, we'd have to wait for him. Like, that poor guy. I mean, really? It just seemed, the whole thing just seemed crazy to me. Then the final example I want to talk to you about, and this one probably is the closest to what I want to talk about. So last year, there was a man living in New York. He had lived with his ex-girlfriend, well, his girlfriend at the time, I guess. They had since split up. but they shared an apartment. And they had a court date to go and figure out who was going to keep living in that apartment. Now, the woman came to the police one morning and said, just before 6 o'clock this morning, my ex came up to me, he threatened me, he beat me, and he told me effectively not to show up to the court hearing. So the police went away and they arrested him. He was charged, and he was like, I had nothing to do with this. I was on my way to work across town whenever this happened. Honestly, this could not have been me. But the problem is that he actually had no evidence to prove his innocence. Now, that in and of itself is an interesting concept, but one we'll have to debate another time. Now, the man, because, again, didn't have a lot of money, he was appointed a public defender in New York. And the public defender was actually quite savvy. He said, "Do you have a smartphone?" The man said, "Yes, I do." And he handed it over. Now, in New York, the public defenders, well, it's not the public defender's office. There is a legal aid office in New York, which has invested over $100,000 in setting up a lab for public defenders and their clients to use, where they bring in things like Cellbrite X-rays and, magnet forensics, all that kind of stuff. And in this particular instance, they were able to take the guy's phone, go into this office, have a forensic investigator look at it, and they were able to take off his device all kinds of location data from the morning of the incident, which showed him being on a train heading in the opposite direction. So he was exonerated, case was dismissed. Now, that's a good ending to the story, but the problem that we have is still pretty much the same. Man can't afford attorney. If he can't afford attorney, he can't afford a forensic investigator. If this happened anywhere other than New York, this guy may have gone to prison for this, which is staggering to me, okay? So let's say this happens in a small town out here in Texas somewhere. Who sticks up for this guy? Who goes out and says, look, I can help you. I want to help you. What can I do? And if no one does, he gets locked up. So unfortunately, this happens fairly frequently. Now, there are other things around which, there are instances where the court will approve for you to spend a certain budget to hire a forensic investigator or stuff like that. But those instances aren't frequent. And so it leaves this gap, and a gap which, frankly, people aren't willing to fill right now. So these examples from our own field, hopefully they give you some indication of why these things are important, but how do they make you feel? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel angry? Do you feel even maybe a little bit ashamed? All of these are perfectly legitimate feelings to have, and I can tell you that I've experienced the same things as I've gone through them myself. So, sorry. Now, as I said before when talking about the movie, okay, it is really easy to let these kinds of feelings swell around in our minds for a couple of days and then let something else take over and something else occupy our minds, and we'll inevitably forget about it and focus our attention elsewhere. But I mean, it doesn't fix the problem. So I'm going to implore you today, don't go away from here without some kind of plan to change it, okay? None of us have got this far in our careers on our own. As the saying goes, no man is an island. And this field continues to grow and evolve. All of our learning and comprehension, all the tools, everything, we rely on other people in a lot of cases to do work that we benefit from. But because of that, we also have the knowledge and the tools to benefit others. So go back to that Julie Amero case. Her life was irreparably turned upside down because she was unable to afford her own forensics expert. I mean, her life was just altered in ways that she'll never recover from. And this guy in this last example in New York, if he hadn't happened to live in New York and be able to make use of the lab that was there for the legal aid, he potentially could have gone to prison and been recorded as a dangerous criminal for the rest of his life. Now, the Innocence Project here in the States believes that as many as 1% of prisoners in the US are actually innocent. Now, 1% might not sound like many people, but 1% of the population, of the prison population in the US is 20,000 people, okay? In other words, the average size of a town in the United States, okay, a whole town, could be innocent and imprisoned, okay? So, what does that mean for us? Well, going back to us for a second, many of us in the field are extremely fortunate, okay? We work in a great area with amazing people, and we do a lot of good, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow and improve. Now, we're also fortunate to be paid pretty well, and in some cases, really well. So we've been afforded plenty of opportunity ourselves, and we are probably the grateful recipients of many of life's benefits. More than that, we work in a field where when the world is in turmoil, as we've seen the last few months, instead of us seeing a slowdown, we see a massive increase in work, which means job security. How many fields in the world can the world go to hell, and yet we're still like all happy because we're still able to work every day? Not many. We are in a very, very good position. Now, I myself, I know I've benefited a lot from working in this field. I've been able to raise a family, buy a home in a nice neighborhood. I've been able to travel to exotic places like Edinburgh, Paris, London, Athens, Vienna, Dublin, and then soon I'll visit places outside of Texas too. So if I've been so blessed in my own life, how can I now just sit back and just do nothing when other people are in need? Why not use some of my own resources and knowledge to ensure that situations like we've talked about up to now are either reduced or eliminated completely? Well, most companies that you work for will have some policy in place for charitable work. Ask about it, okay? There will likely be limits on what you're allowed to do, but doing something is better than doing nothing. I'm sure everyone will agree on that. Now, don't go away from here with this feeling of righteous indignation and then let it pass, like we've already talked about. Let it motivate you to do something good. Now, that being said, you may want to get involved, but have no idea as to how. So I'm going to just help you out with a few suggestions here. First of all, you need to educate yourself on the issues. Now, I don't mean via the media. I mean real world experiences. Talk to criminal defense attorneys. Talk to public defenders. Ask them what they need and how you can help. Many of the clients, they can't afford their own attorneys, much less a forensic expert. So see what they need and then go from there. Second, you might want to pledge to do X number of hours of pro bono work every year. Now, this will of course depend on your own circumstances, but allocate something. As the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Now, next thing, as soon as I finished reading this Just Mercy book, I actually reached out directly to Brian Stevenson. He runs an organization called the Equal Justice Initiative. And the organization's mission is to end mass incarceration and excessive punishment in the United States, to challenging racial and economic injustice, and to protecting basic human rights for the most vulnerable people in American society. So when I reached out to him, I explained that, you know, I saw the movie, I read the book, this is what I do for work, this is what I'm good at. I want to help. Please tell me how I can help you and your organization to do that. Now, and I said, you know, I will do all of this at no charge for you also. Now, I realize that not everyone's in a position to do that, but again, start somewhere and offer something. Now, you don't have to go out and hit up EJI directly yourselves, but you can look more locally. So just looking within 20 miles of my own home, I found many different organizations and places where I can volunteer my time. Now, your mileage is going to vary here. What do I mean by that? Well, I understand that some of these causes or some of these organizations may make you think, I don't know if I necessarily feel comfortable helping with this organization or this organization or this organization. And you know what? That's fine. That is perfectly normal, and no one should ever feel pressured to align themselves with an organization that doesn't share their own values. So I've sat with forensicators from all over the world, and they all have their own experiences, their own backgrounds, and they have formed their own opinions and ideas. There have even been disagreements and differences of opinion, but we're able to all work through them and work together. There is no one size fits all for this type of work. You will need to put in the research yourself, look at which organizations may share the same beliefs and core values as yourself or your business, and then make contact. Ask them how you can help. I guarantee that they all do need this help. And so you will have no lack of opportunity to offer service. So how else, besides that, how else can you get involved on a community level? Well, a few more suggestions here. Okay, as you can see on the slide here, we've got just a selection here. Each one of these organizations does something to take your skills and use them to help others to learn. So why is SANS up here? Well, SANS has a whole bunch of free resources. You can go and check out the SANS website for that. But more, just to make an announcement today, we are releasing today and allowing people to sign up. SANS is now set up, or I help SANS to set up a cyber camp for teens that will start in August. So you can go to sans.org/cyber-camp and learn about what we're going to be doing there. And that will help the next generation of forensic investigators come up, and they in turn can help, and so on. That's not all. Again, local school districts could always do with some help with someone coming in and teaching the students about cybercrime, or you know, how to stay safe online, things of that nature. All right, and I realize that I'm really pushing time here. So one last thing. Michael Hoffman, SANS instructor, he partnered with Trace Labs recently to put an open source intelligence search party capture the flag. In this event, participants were asked to find real world missing persons as part of the CTF using their intelligence gathering skills. And it was a huge success, and a lot of good was done as a result. Lots of avenues of investigation opened to the police. So now you don't have to wait for a CTF to be hosted. You can go straight to tracelabs.org, sign up, and start working on things right away. So there you go. That's about it. So like I said, not highly technical talk, but hopefully something which has been thought-provoking to you and will urge you to go out and find some good to do with the forensic experience and knowledge that you have. If you have any questions, throw them into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.